You know, most things in life, you can make your own rules, you can even cut corners, but when it comes to concealed carry, there are 10 unwritten rules that you should never break. No matter if you're new or experienced, open or concealed, all of these things will apply to you, and today I'm going to tell you what those 10 things are. Some of you may not like some of the things I'm going to say in this list, but I'm just giving you my straight up opinion. And remember that these aren't the only 10 things to consider when you are a concealed carrier or open carrier for that matter, but these are 10 of the most important things that I think everybody should follow. So if you like the type of content that I do here, including gun reviews, comparisons, 7 best series, concealed carry, even some World War II gun reviews, make sure you subscribe and hit your notifications. Also, I'd love to have you guys join the SHOT team either here or over on Patreon and get some pretty cool perks. Let's go and get into it. Now, the first one I want to start with is a question. Why do you carry a gun? Well, if you're answering that either in your head or in the comments, most people's response is going to be, to be prepared for some event where somebody may hurt me or my family. And I think that answer is pretty much spot on. But the one thing you don't want to do is be negligent in your vigilance. Because look, you can have 13 guns on you with 20 extra magazines, 14 knives, and anything else you want to have on you. But if you're not vigilant, you're not paying attention to your surroundings, it doesn't matter what kind of gun you're carrying. I mean, honest to God, how many of these videos have we seen because of Ring cameras and just cameras everywhere in general, where things happen, boom, just like that? I mean, these things are almost always a super quick response. And you have to have a super quick response in order to protect yourself. You have to make a split-second decision a lot of the times as well. Now, I'm not saying that you have to be super paranoid everywhere you go, but I am saying there's things that you need to do when you're in public, especially where there is a lot of people, especially. You really need to pay attention because you never know who is going to come through those doors. Now, the chances of things like this, generally speaking, are relatively low, but again, that depends on where you live. But it doesn't always depend on that. So, you may have a false sense of security if you live in a, upper middle class or, whatever, but those places get hit too. It may not be some mass event. It may be you walking up to your doorstep late at night, coming home from work, and somebody comes up behind you. Could be as simple as you sitting in a restaurant, but your back is turned to the door, so you have no idea who's coming in. Or it could be you're walking around the grocery store and your wife is loading 5 cases of water into the buggy while you're looking at Facebook. Any number of these situations can happen, and so if you're not going to be vigilant, really what is the point of carrying? You got to pay attention to what's going on around you. Another unwritten rule is you really need to know the laws in your state when it comes to concealed carry. Like, for real, you need to know the laws in your state. While some states employ a stand your ground law, which is going to, tell you, the law-abiding citizen, that you have no duty to retreat, in other states, you actually do have a duty to retreat if you can safely do that, maybe even in your own home. Now, of course, most states have some form of a castle doctrine, but at the same time, you really just need to comb through those things because every single year, and I don't know the exact statistics on this, but every single year there are people that get hit with civil lawsuits, criminal lawsuits, and it could put your family into not only a bad position at the time of the self-defense situation, but afterwards in a bad financial situation. So what is the law about no concealable weapons signs? They have to be a certain distance off the ground. They have to be a certain size. Obviously easily visible. Sometimes those things are invalid. Sometimes you can go in those establishments, all they can do is ask you to leave. And in other states, you could have your permit stripped from you if you get caught with a gun inside of a business that is clearly stating that you shouldn't be there with your firearm. Maybe you just got constitutional carry, but you still got to remember there's certain places that you are not allowed to carry. In other states, there's going to be places in your car where you can't carry that gun and other places you can, right? So you may be in a state where you can pretty much carry the gun anywhere in your car. What about carrying in a neighboring state? You could be in a totally gun-friendly state and right next door is an unfriendly gun state, and because you crossed that invisible line, you went from following the law on one side to breaking it and potentially losing your gun, your freedom, and everything if you cross this side, or it could cost you a buttload of money in order to try to get out of that situation. So that's the last thing I want, is law-abiding gun owners taking it upon themselves to carry their firearm and not knowing the laws, and then they end up getting screwed in the long run. Another unwritten rule is you need to have your gun on you every single day. Now, what does that look like for you at your job? Are you allowed to carry, in your car to your job? Most places, your car is an extension of your home, and unless it is like just strictly prohibited, you should be able to have your gun in your car at your job, but maybe you can't. Maybe you say, I work in a bad part of town, and I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to let my employer dictate to me what I can and cannot do when it comes to my personal safety. Think of a hospital in my area that's downtown in what has $1 million homes on this side of the street and the hood on the other side of the street, pretty much. So, that hospital, I imagine, downtown, middle of the night, it's just super sketchy. These are the decisions that you're going to have to make. And it's one of those things, in my opinion, you need to be okay with whatever the consequence. So let's say, unfortunately, somebody comes in, they're looking to do harm to you or your staff. You know you're not supposed to have a gun. They say you shouldn't have a gun, but you have to use that gun in self-defense. And the theory is, and what I always used to say to myself, because I worked at plenty of places where they said, hey, no guns, blah, blah, blah. But my hope was always that if I had to use this gun in self-defense and I end up protecting somebody that's at my job and preventing loss of life, that they would actually look at that and be like, okay, he broke the rules here, but he helped, save, countless others by doing this. And hey, if they would have said, sorry, Haig, you're fired, well, I would have had to accept those consequences and been okay with it, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to get home to our families, and that's what matters the most. Sometimes you got to make the tough decision when it comes to that. Now, the next rule when it comes to concealed carry is about the type of gun that you buy. Now, I made a ton of different videos comparing different carry guns, telling you which ones I like, which ones I don't like, all of that kind of stuff, right? But you want to make sure that you pick one that you can shoot really well and is in a caliber that makes sense for self-defense. 9mm, 380 is kind of your threshold. That's your minimum where you want to be. 9mm is going to be a really good option because it's controllable, doesn't have a ton of recoil, and yet it is super effective. But the one thing you don't want to do is take for granted the gun that you're picking, because that's going to be just a super important part of this. That's going to be a huge factor into whether you do carry every single day or not. Buy a gun that's big and bulky, chances are you won't carry it. Buy a gun that's too small, and that one will actually maybe have a ton of recoil, and you're not going to want to shoot it or practice with it. So choosing the right carry gun is super important, but fortunately, like I said, I have a ton of videos out there, and there's some other creators that have videos out there when it comes to this subject. And there's a reason that I make sure that I cover this stuff from time to time, because, not everybody knows that more weight equals less recoil and less weight equals more recoil typically. A lot of people think it's the opposite way around, but you really want to just do a little bit of research when it comes to the concealed carry gun that you choose. Now, another thing that you want to consider is the accessories that you want to put on that carry gun. So if you work at nighttime, you may want to have a red dot on here, something that you can easily see. You may want to have night sights on it. Maybe this is your only gun, and so one thing you'll want to consider in your research is, okay, does this smaller carry gun, although it looks like it'll be great for concealed carry, is it something that I could also use for home defense? If so, I need to make sure that this thing has at least one slot for a rail so I can put a micro light on it, because home defense, lights, You need to be able to identify what goes bump in the night. So that's going to be super important. So if this is your only gun, that's something you want to consider. Now, when it comes to like triggers and internal parts, I don't typically mess with that stuff. I try to choose a gun that, I'm going to shoot really good right off the rip. Don't need to do a lot with it. Again, I've covered this, in a ton of different videos, so you can go with that. But, red dots and stuff, it may seem like, oh, gosh, I don't need that on my gun. But if you work a lot of night shifts and stuff and, whatever, having a red dot is really, really an awesome advantage because you can see anything at any time and being able to shoot that gun. That's another thing, and that's going to lead me actually right perfectly into this next one, which is don't let this gun just collect dust inside of your purse or your holster or whatever. This needs to be the gun that you shoot the most, and not just target ammo either. Now, the majority of ammo that goes through these guns is going to be target ammo because, self-defense ammo is expensive, but you do need to run that self-defense ammo through it as well because you will have, point of impact shifts from time to time, depending upon the grain, the round, and all of that kind of stuff as well. But if there is any gun that you need to be a sharpshooter with and be your best at, it is your carry gun for sure. And one thing you could do too is make sure that when you practice with your carry gun, if you have a range that will let you unholster at the same time, you can practice those things. Maybe even get a shot timer, something that's going to get your adrenaline going just a little bit and kind of catch you off guard because you never know when this stuff will happen. So if you can draw out of a holster at a random time, if a friend goes with you or something like that, and you're putting shots on target consistently, especially that first shot, man, you really have something special there. Now, another kind of unwritten rule is the politics that plays into guns. Now, it's not something I talk a lot about here, but it's still a part of what I do and how I think and how I vote, and it was never like that before. I could care less before. If you asked Headshot 10 years ago, or, well, I guess 11 years ago now, hey, who are you voting for in the upcoming whatever, primary? I don't care, it doesn't affect me. Until I started to realize that these things do affect me. And then when I started looking at, guns and, how often they were attacked, all of this kind of started once I started getting into guns. And I'm like, dude, I can't believe they want to take this away. I can remember when I started, it was actually a really good time for me to kind of get more active, and that's because I was standing in line waiting to buy the 3 boxes of ammo. You could only buy 3 boxes of 9mm at that time. So here I am trying to start a channel. I got no ammo, I just bought my first guns and I'm waiting in line in order to just get the 3 boxes I can. Things were really crazy then. So you just want to, understand that you may get a little bit more political. It doesn't have to run your life. I'm not saying that. But you definitely want to pay attention to who you're voting for and not just the rhetoric in the election year. You want to see what they do in the off years, especially when it comes to guns. How are they voting when all of these bills are going through? That's something you really want to pay attention to. Why it's so important is because if you lose the right to any of this, you're never getting it back. So that's why you will see gun owners so steadfast in their beliefs and basically opposing any kind of new gun control because of how devastating it can be and the effects afterwards as well. Now, another unwritten rule to being a gun owner is once people find out, their opinion may change towards you. Now, again, this is going to be highly dependent upon where you live. Everywhere that I've ever worked since I started carrying a gun and really getting into this and it becoming more of a lifestyle, everybody that I've worked with has pretty much been cool. There's been some people that have been like, oh, you don't need an AR-15, but, revolvers are okay and shotguns or whatever, and those are pretty simple points to kind of counter. But, at the same time, if you live in California or New York or somewhere like that where they're not as open to it, then you may have some pushback. I think it's one of those things you just have to kind of, just be prepared for. And not only be prepared for maybe a little bit of pushback, maybe a little bit of conversation, but opening conversations to people and maybe even being able to change their mind to an extent. Are you going to change their mind? Maybe not. Maybe you will, whatever. But having some good information to be able to back up why you're a gun owner now, it never hurts. You may introduce people to firearms that you never thought you would before. And that, again, leads me perfectly into the next thing. You are now an ambassador. This is more than just a hobby for most of us. I don't even call this a hobby. I call this a way of life. Being a gun owner, being an advocate for the Second Amendment, right? It goes a lot deeper than just self-defense or concealed carry or open carry. But at the end of the day, you could potentially maybe influence one of your friends, one of your coworkers, maybe somebody really close to you that was totally opposed to guns, and then they see you taking it upon yourself and you tell them about your range trips and they're like, hey, I want to go with you. Anybody that I know or that knows me that I've ever worked with has always had the opportunity to go shooting with me, right? It's something that, I did last year when somebody wrecked my truck, right? Truck was down for 4 months. Took a good buddy of mine with me. Never really expected him to pay for anything. I took him out there with me. Ammo's expensive, whatever, but he was doing me a favor. I do him a favor, whatever. That's totally fine. But anytime any of those guys would ask me, hey man, can I go to the range with you? Yes, sometimes it'd come through, sometimes it wouldn't. We all have busy lives. But regardless, when you become a gun owner, you might be surprised as to the people that you actually bring into it, and that is always a good thing. Now, we've already talked a little bit about knowing the law in your state, but there are some kind of gray areas that you want to potentially avoid. Okay. Now, one gray area or one area that is not gray, this is black and white, is when you are carrying your gun, you need to be sober 100%. Now, there's some states where you can conceal carry inside of a bar or an establishment that serves alcohol as long as you're not drinking. If you like to indulge in some kind of greenery or drink a couple beers after work or whatever, do what you're going to do. Totally fine. I don't really care, but at the same time, you do not want to introduce firearms and anything that's going to alter your state of mind. I talked about this in a video a few months ago. Everything gun owners need to know about a certain plant that has become wildly popular and decriminalized in a lot of places, but a lot of gun owners are having to choose between one or the other because technically you can't own or have both. Something you want to consider, but being sober 100% of the time when you're carrying this gun is the rule, right? It's an unwritten rule, but it is the rule because, again, it's like altering your state of mind when you have a weapon that could potentially save your life or take a life. You want to make sure that you are in your right state of mind. It was for being angry, right? You just got into a big blow-up argument with your girlfriend, right? But you get into, your car and then you get into some kind of road rage incident, God forbid. And now you have your gun on you. And, look, that's the kind of things you want to avoid. Those are the situations that happen like super quick, and now your life is altered by a decision that could have just been made so much easier if now you left your gun at home. I'm talking always talking about having your gun on you. But there's going to be some instances potentially where if you are in a fit of rage over an argument or something, or maybe you're super depressed about something that's not going on in your life, maybe you should leave the gun in the safe, that day, right? Or until you cool down. So it is something you just got to kind of keep your own self in check and understand, okay, I'm going to take this out of the equation and I'm just going to calm down before I start carrying my gun again. That's another reason that we oppose these red flag laws because, if you get mad, everybody gets mad, right? But if you get mad over something and somebody, turns you in and says, hey, I think he's going to be a danger to himself or somebody else, that's why we always oppose those, because that puts you in a bad spot when you may just be having a freaking bad day. So that's why I say just kind of keep your own self in check. Just understand, how you're feeling at any given moment because, yeah, we all have bad days. Sometimes really bad things happen to us and, we got to deal with that. And it's unfortunate, but that's just the way life is. So just kind of knowing when to maybe leave it at home. But most of the time, you want to make sure that you have it on you, of course. And the last unwritten rule that you should expect 100% of the time is you ain't going to have just one. For this argument, why do you need more than one gun? Well, why do you need hair extensions? Or why do you need your makeup? Or, hey, why do you need that nice, car that costs $100,000? Well, maybe you don't need it, but you like it. And when it comes to guns and being an ambassador, right, of the Second Amendment, you're going to find that, man, well, all right, I got my carry gun and that's cool, but now I need a shotgun, an AR-15. Maybe I need 2 ARs. Now I want the AK because I heard the 7.62 by 39 is really cool. Now I need another carry gun because I kind of, like this P365 or, I like the Shield Plus, whatever. But just realize that concealed carry is what started this channel. It's what got me into guns, and that's what's continued this lifestyle that I live. So it's just like tattoos, right? If you have any kind of addictive personality, which I unfortunately definitely do, then you won't just have one. You gotta have more than that, and you'll start to realize how cool each and every gun is, how different they are, how different they shoot. They all have their own little characteristics, and your concealed carry gun could start an entire chain of events where you're investing your money into something that will always retain and or go up in value, and that is firearms. So there you go. 10 unwritten rules for every concealed carrier, something that you got to follow. Now, of course, I want to hear maybe your own list or some things that you think are an unwritten rule that everybody needs to follow. I may use those in a part 2 if you guys like this video. And again, if you like what I do, subscribe, hit your notifications, totally free for you. And if you want to join the Shot Squad, gain access to some pretty cool perks, you can do that here or over on Patreon. Big thanks, see you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.